Chapter 6, Merleau-Ponty's Preface to Phenomenology of Perception. I'm very excited to be reading about my favorite piece of literature out of all the literature I've read. Wait, the preface. Is that the thing written by the other guy? What's his face? It starts with a C, I think. Carmichael or something? Either way, fantastic. All right. Let me conclude part 1 by looking at the famous preface that Merleau-Ponty wrote to his most well-known oeuvre, Phenomenology of Perception. The preface seeks to give a short answer to the question, what is phenomenology? Since Merleau-Ponty, in his discussion, is drawing insights from both Husserl and Heidegger, the preface is a suitable candidate for a nuanced reply. On the one hand, phenomenology is characterized by a form of essentialism. It is not interested in a merely empirical or factual account of different phenomena, but seeks, on the contrary, to disclose the invariant structures of, for example, the stream of consciousness, embodiment, perception, etc. On the other hand, however, the point of departure for its investigation of the world and human existence remains factual existence. Phenomenology is not simply a form of essentialism, it is also a philosophy of facticity. That's interesting. Wow. Wow. I'm having trouble with what to do with that. We're going to highlight that just cause, you know? That way when you're sitting with the boys later, you can flip through your highlights and ask them questions. All right. 2. Phenomenology is a form of transcendental philosophy. It seeks to reflect on the conditions of possibility of experience and cognition, and it suspends our natural and everyday metaphysical assumptions, in particular our assumption about the existence of a mind-independent world, in order to investigate them critically. At the same time, however, it admits that reflection must start from an already existing relation to the world, and that a central task of philosophy is really to comprehend this immediate and direct contact with the world. Phenomenology seeks to establish a strictly scientific philosophy, but it also has the task of accounting for our life world and of doing justice to our pre-scientific experience of space-time and world. Phenomenology is frequently described as a purely descriptive discipline. It describes our experiences just as they are given. It is interested neither in physiological or biological origin of the experiences, nor does it seek to provide a causal account. But at the same time, Husserl himself has emphasized the importance of developing a genetic phenomenology, i.e., a phenomenology that analyzes the origin, development, and historicity of the intentional structures. As Merleau-Ponty remarks, it might be tempting to seek to overcome these apparent discrepancies by simply differentiating between Husserl's transcendental phenomenology, which has often been seen as an attempt to thematize the pure and invariant conditions of cognition, and Heidegger's hermeneutical and existential phenomenology. Oh my goodness. All right, taking a break. Let's take a nice sip of water. Blah. Biggita. Okay. All right. As Merleau-Ponty remarks, it might be tempting to seek to overcome these apparent discrepancies by simply differentiating between Husserl's transcendental phenomenology, which has often been seen as an attempt to thematize the pure and invariant conditions of cognition, and Heidegger's hermeneutical and existential phenomenology, which has frequently been interpreted as an attempt to disclose the historical and practical contextuality of cognition. But Merleau-Ponty quickly rejects this suggestion as being too naive. As he points out, all the contrasts mentioned can be found internally in Husserl's thinking. Moreover, and more important, we are not dealing with true contrasts or alternatives, but rather with complementary aspects that phenomenology, if properly understood, necessarily includes or incorporates. That's right. What's the word? Compresence or something? Husserl's dictum to the things themselves is interpreted by Merleau-Ponty as a criticism of scientism, and as an attempt to disclose a more original relation to the world than the one manifested in scientific rationality. It is a call for a return to the perceptual world that is prior to and precondition for any scientific conceptualization and articulation. Scientism seeks to reduce us to objects in the world, objects that can be exhaustively explained by objectifying theories like those of physics, biology, or psychology. It argues that the methods of natural science provide the sole means of epistemic access to the world, and that entities that cannot be captured in terms accepted by natural science are non-existent. As Merleau-Ponty insists, however, we should never forget that our knowledge of the world, including our scientific knowledge, arises from a bodily anchored first-person perspective, and that science would be meaningless without this experiential dimension. The scientific discourse is rooted in the world of experience, in the experiential world, and if we wish to comprehend the performance and limits of science, we should investigate the original experience of the world of which science is a higher order articulation. The one-sided focus of science on what is available from a third-person perspective is, for Merleau-Ponty, consequently both naive and dishonest, since the scientific practice constantly presupposes the scientist's first-person and pre-scientific experience of the world. That's interesting. I don't recall. Oh, God. I need to read Merleau-Ponty again. I immediately have the question of object relation that is, like in part constitutive. But that's Cartesian. Bad Sam. No Cartesian stuff. All right, skipping that thought. Phenomenology's emphasis on the importance of the first-person perspective should not be confused with the classical, transcendental, idealist attempt to detach the mind from the world in order to let a pure and worldless subject constitute the richness and concreteness of the world. This attempt was also naive. The subject has no priority over the world, and truth is not to be found in the interiority of man. There is no interiority, since man is in the world. Literally just highlighted the question of interiority. What was it, Daseins interiority or history's interiority? Ugh. All right, you get put in the question pool too, because that's a very strong statement. To put it differently, the subjectivity disclosed by phenomenological reflection is not a concealed interiority, but an open world relation. To use Heidegger's phrase, we are dealing with a being in the world, a world that, moreover, should not be understood as the mere totality of positioned objects or as the sum total of causal relations, but rather as the context of meaning that we are constantly situated within. I realized the problem with my thought a moment ago. History having an interiority, but also being a like a constituting being, and being of which is also interior and exterior, like brings the meaning of interiority as something particular to this like first person subjective, and makes it something radically different because it's now in the world and the historicity of the world. Oh man, that's so good. All right. Had idealism been true, had the world been a mere product of our constitution and construction, the world would have appeared in full transparency. It would only possess the meaning that we ascribe to it, and it would consequently contain no hidden aspects, no sense of mystery, mastery. Idealism and constructivism deprive the world of its transcendence. For such positions, knowledge of the world and others are no longer a problem. But things are more complicated. As careful phenomenological analysis will reveal, I do not simply exist for myself, but also for others, just as others do not simply exist for themselves, but also for me. The subject does not have a monopoly either on its self-understanding or on its understanding of the world. On the contrary, there are aspects of myself and aspects of the world that only become available and accessible through the other. In short, my existence is not simply a question of how I apprehend myself, it is also a question of how others apprehend me. Subjectivity is necessarily embedded and embodied in a social, historical, and natural context. So freaking good. The embodiment of subjectivity is historical and natural. It is of history and the world. What does that mean for interiority? I'll just make that one yellow. That's the normal highlight for good stuff. Good stuff. Excuse me. All right. The world is inseparable from subjectivity and intersubjectivity, and the task of phenomenology is to think world, subjectivity, and intersubjectivity in their proper connection. See, there's definitely a feeling of like delimiting between, but then necessarily like shoving them back into each other, like making them inseparable. So what is this? I can't even think that through. All right, continuing. Our relation to the world is so fundamental, so obvious and natural that we normally do not reflect upon it. It is this domain of ignored obviousness that phenomenology seeks to investigate. The task of phenomenology is not to obtain new empirical knowledge about different areas in the world, but rather to comprehend the basic relation to the world that is presupposed by any such empirical investigation. When phenomenology emphasizes the methodological necessity of a type of reflective reserve, what Husserl has called the epoche and reduction, this is not because phenomenology intends to desert the world in favor of pure consciousness, but because we can only make those intentional threads that attach us to the world visible by slacking them slightly. The world is, as Merleau-Ponty writes, wonderful. It is a gift and a riddle. That gets turned into a super awesome pink highlight. But in order to realize this, it is necessarily... Oh, I don't even know what I'm doing with my colors. That was supposed to be blue, wasn't it? I don't know what I'm doing anymore. But in order to realize this, it is necessary to suspend our ordinary blind and thoughtless taking of the world for granted. Normally, I live in a natural and engaged world relation, but as a philosopher, I cannot make do with such a naive world immersion. I must distance myself from it, if ever so slightly, in order to be able to account for it. That's interesting, because that's also like synonymous with a condition for subjectivity itself. So why is it that the condition for subjectivity is also the condition for the recognition of subjectivity? Dun dun dun. This is why Merleau-Ponty argues that an analysis of our being in the world presupposes that phenomenological reduction. What? This is why Merleau-Ponty argues that an analysis of our being in the world presupposes the phenomenological reduction. I wish that was a hyperlink, but I'm certain it's not. Oh, it's just a footnote, a little reference. Poopy doopy. Oh no, what page was I on? There we go. The phenomenological investigation proceeds from the factual to the essential, but that is not where the analysis ends. The focus on the essential is not the goal, but a means to understand, conceptualize, and articulate the depth of our factual existence. The focus on essential structures is due to a wish to capture the richness of the factual and not because of a desire to abstract from and ignore facticity. Huh. It's interesting taking like ideal objects, as like factual objects. That they have an objectivity. The analysis of intentionality, the analysis of the directedness or aboutness of consciousness is often presented as one of the central accomplishments of phenomenology. One does not merely love, fear, see, or judge. One loves a beloved, fears something fearful, sees an object, and judges a state of affairs. Regardless of whether we are talking about a perception, thought, judgment, fantasy, doubt, expectation, or recollection, all of these diverse forms of consciousness are characterized by intending objects and cannot be analyzed properly without a look at their objective correlate, e.g., the perceived, doubted, or expected object. It is consequently not a problem for the subject to reach the object, since its being is intentional. That is, the subject is per se self-transcending, per se directed towards something different from itself. But apart from having analyzed our theoretical object-directedness in great detail, phenomenology also has made it clear that the world is given prior to any analysis. Identification and objectification. There is, in short, a pre- and a theoretical relation to the world. As Merleau-Ponty points out, this is why Husserl distinguished two types of intentionality. There is what Husserl and the logical investigations called act intentionality, which is an objectifying form of intentionality, but there is also a more fundamental passive or operative form of non-objectifying intentionality, which Husserl analyzed in detail in some of his later works. According to Merleau-Ponty, this original and basic world relation cannot be explained or analyzed further. All phenomenology can do is to call attention to it and make us respect its irreducibility. That section, I have a Merleau-Ponty quote that I don't know if is, or not Merleau-Ponty, but a Husserl quote that I don't know if it's actually a Husserl quote, but it's something along the lines of, there is no object without a concept and no concept without an object. And I like that this takes those characterizations, like the mutuality of it, and puts it into something prior, something that's irreducible. I think that would be like, for Merleau-Ponty, I think he uses the word like pre-apprehensive. Anyway, Merleau-Ponty characterizes phenomenology as a perpetual critical self-reflection. It should not take anything for granted, least of all itself. It is, to put it differently, a constant meditation. Merleau-Ponty's point here is that phenomenology is always en route. This always comes to the fore in Merleau-Ponty's famous assertion. Oof, let me get a sip of water here, Jesus. That the most important lesson of the reduction is the impossibility of a complete reduction. The reduction must be seen as a particular reflective move, and Merleau-Ponty's point is that we, as finite creatures, are incapable of effectuating an absolute reflection, that once and for all would allow us to cut our ties to the world immersed life in order to survey it from a view from nowhere. Why is the first person privileged? Again, as I was saying earlier, the third person, the object relation that is also constitutive. So we don't have a view from nowhere. We have a view from somewhere that is made from a view from nowhere. Where's the view from nowhere in my view from somewhere? Why is it taken out? It seems like too hard of a line. Even the most radical reflection depends upon and is linked to an unreflected life that, as Merleau-Ponty puts it, remains its initial, constant, and final situation. Whoa, final, fuck. Excuse me, oof. We're going pink. I'm gonna go back and highlight. Oof. There we go. To say that the reduction cannot be completed is not to say that it cannot be carried out, but this procedure is something that has to be performed repeatedly, rather than completed once and for all. To that extent, Merleau-Ponty's remark about the unfinished character of phenomenology and about the incomplete reduction are two ways of making the same point. As Merleau-Ponty points out in closing, however, the fact that phenomenology remains unfinished, the fact that it is always underway, is not a defect or a flaw that should be amended, but rather one of its essential features. As a wonder over the world, phenomenology is not a solid, inflexible system, but rather in constant movement. Oof, I love Merleau-Ponty so much. Merleau-Ponty's Ontology, 2nd edition. There's just so much to flip and read. Secondary on Merleau-Ponty, Phenomenology of Perception. Maybe I should do a secondary on that because I've already read the book. We'll highlight that bad boy in blue because I don't know what I'm doing. Oh shit. The SEP entry. I already read that bad boy. Heck yeah. Alright. That's the end of part 1. Fucking do it to it. Alright, have a good one.